The division is clear. Well, ultimately, it comes down to two issues. First, whether to start a ceasefire, and second, whether to emphasize the right to self-defend. These two questions would define what's going to happen in the next phase.
To those who voted against this resolution, I must say that your decision shocks me to my core. In Israel, we are fighting for our very survival. My elderly parents living in Ashkelon have spent the last 20 days running back and forth to their bomb shelters as rockets rain down on them, deliberately on them, on civilians. And you cannot condemn even these deliberate attacks on civilians perpetrated by terror organizations? If any of your countries endured a similar massacre, I am certain that you would act with much greater force than Israel. Much greater force. There would be no question in your minds that such a barbaric slaughter requires a broad military operation against the terrorists who committed such inhumane atrocities to eradicate their terrorist capabilities in order to make sure that such atrocities can never happen again. How would Moscow react if terrorist death squads wiped out entire neighborhoods in Moscow? How would Beijing respond if genocidal jihadis beheaded and murdered your babies? I will give you a moment to reflect on that thought. But I believe every person, not only here in this room, across the globe, whoever is watching this discussion, knows exactly how you would respond.
主席，我的话会很简短，我只是想说，尊敬的以色列常驻代表，
My distinguished PR of Israel,
在这里辩论
having a debate with Israel was not my intention. That Israel treats China as a rival, either as a rival. You picked the wrong target, probably. You should be aware that from the very start of this round of conflict between Palestine and Israel, China has unequivocally condemned all acts that harm civilians in violation of international law. When we refer to civilians, they include both Palestinian civilians and those of Israel. Second, regarding today's resolutions, you made some comments. I'd like to remind you that just last week, this council, there was a resolution before the council which contained elements that condemned Hamas attacks. China voted in favor of the resolution. However, that resolution was vetoed. Third, in my earlier statement, I made it abundantly clear that China is not denying Israel's legitimate concerns. However, we emphasize equal attention to the legitimate security concerns and legitimate rights of both Palestine and Israel in the current circumstances, where we try to deal properly with this round of the conflict between Palestine and Israel. We cannot deny that the rights of the Palestinian people have for a very long time not been properly guaranteed, and the only way out, we believe, is the two-state solution. But that has not been properly settled. So let's be frank, let's be honest, face up to facts, and put aside differences and join forces to handle well the prevailing issues, and also to chart a path whereby both Palestinians and Israelis can live in harmony, tranquility, peace, and happiness.
But The most shocking news was that the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, asked the Secretary General of the United Nations to apologize or resign because of his statement in the Security Council.
The UN is failing, and you, Mr. Secretary General, have lost all morality and impartiality. Because when you say those terrible words that these heinous attacks did not happen in a vacuum, you are tolerating terrorism. And by tolerating terrorism, you are justifying terrorism. Hamas, as the minister explained, beheaded babies, burned families, raped women, abducted kids, babies, Holocaust survivors. And the SG is blaming the victim? You are blaming Israel? This is a pure blood libel. This is a pure blood libel, and I think that the Secretary General must resign.
I am shocked by the misrepresentations by some of my statement yesterday in the Security Council, as if I was justifying acts of terror by Hamas. This is false. It was the opposite. In the beginning of my intervention yesterday, I clearly stated, and I quote, "I have condemned unequivocally the horrifying and unprecedented 7 October acts of terror by Hamas in Israel. Nothing can justify the deliberate killing, injuring, and kidnapping of civilians or the launching of rockets against civilian targets." End quote. Indeed, I spoke of the grievances of the Palestinian people. And in doing so, I also clearly stated, and I quote, "But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas." End quote. And then I went on with my intervention referring all my positions on all aspects of the Middle East crisis. I believe it was necessary to set the record straight, especially out of respect to the victims and to their families.
Like the spokesperson of the UN Secretary General said, this is just the opinion of one member state and there is no consideration of the resignation of the Secretary General. The UN and Israel relationship now is kind of deteriorating. What would that impact the humanitarian operation in Gaza as well as your communication with the Israeli part?
I mean, I think you're jumping, you're extrapolating in a way. I spoke to my colleagues in Jerusalem this morning. They continue to have contacts at all levels with their Israeli counterparts, whether in government, with the military, and those contacts are continuing.